there was so much joy about what is to come, but there was also so much grief at the same time. I was experiencing past grief. I was experiencing current grief by leaving my community and leaving my family and leaving what I knew to enter into this new season to choose you. Like being able to sit in both the difficulty and the joy, both the grief and the gratitude, giving myself permission to be as I was in this fiance season, I think was so important, just to not be so hard on myself.
Welcome to the Grace for the Growth podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Leo. The goal of this podcast is to encourage you on your own growth journey by empowering you to live your life with authenticity, freedom, and confidence. We will get real and raw as we dive into honest conversations about life, faith, business, relationships, dating, healing, and so much more. My goal is that you would walk away from our time together feeling a little less alone, a little less crazy, and a little more brave to be yourself. I hope you will find yourself more compassionate to past you, challenged as present you, and excited for future you. Embrace the story, welcome the messy of it all, sit in the unknown, and most importantly, live authentically. So pull up a chair in my virtual living room and let's dive into today's conversation.
Welcome back to Grace for the Growth with Courtney Leo, which my name is actually Courtney Alexander, but that's the name of the podcast. And I'm here with Nick again, and we're just going to have a conversation today about a really unique season of our life and join you to listen in as we just kind of process it and kind of talk through it. I just want to say thanks so much for all of your comments and loves and views and likes and all that kind of stuff on our engagement story. It's really fun to share that with you, to share that behind the scenes moments. So I'm really, really grateful. And we are wrapping up this portion of the story, and we've got some really fun Grace for the Growth content coming. I'm recording a couple episodes with some friends this week. So we've got some really good stuff coming for you in the next couple weeks. So if you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube or Spotify or anything like that, please be sure to do that so you don't miss out on any of our episodes coming out on Fridays this spring and summer. That sounded way too like
every
voiceover.
Friday, some Fridays. No,
that sounded
Fridays.
way too voiceover. Hi, Nick.
Well, hello.
Thanks for being back here today.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
That's great. I'm glad. I didn't force you to be here. I asked you to be here.
My calendar said record podcast.
There you go. Well, today we're just going to process through. So one thing we talked about, so last episode when we were talking about our engagement, we really wanted to give you the timeline and kind of walk through that timeline, as so many people ask us of what that looks like and everything. But today we just kind of want to process what the next season of our lives has been. And it kind of bleeds into a lot of the lessons that we're learning right now. We by no means are relationship pros, as we just have
probably the
baby
furthest thing from a relationship pro out there. I mean, this is by far my longest relationship.
Woo woo. Same.
Yeah. Before you, it was 3 months.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
I'm not going to act like, well, I know it all.
Nope.
Sure. I'm stumbling and bumbling and hoping that I get it right, and a lot of times I don't. And luckily, you have a lot of grace for me. # Grace for the Growth. You know what I'm saying?
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
I mean, not from you, but
no, the Lord.
Yeah, you just kind of
absolutely
themed up
I'm
in
just,
there.
I'm just making sure, like the Lord sent me to make sure, like, oh, you want grace for the growth? Well, I'm gonna give you a husband to make you use grace for the growth.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow. Anywho, so today we're going to talk.
To be a blessing.
You are a blessing. We're going to talk about our engagement season today, and I feel really passionate to talk about this. It's not just like a let's talk through the timeline type thing, but I really want to reflect on it because, we hear there's a lot of content out there, not a ton, but there's more growing content out there about singleness, about Christian dating. Again, still, I know there's still not a lot, but it continues to grow. But I feel like there was just a lot of things as I entered into engagement season that I felt wasn't being talked about and wasn't that people just don't really share about what that was like or what that experience, especially being people who experienced singleness for a long time, were entering into engagement as fully independent adults and learning to merge. And so we just kind of wanted to talk about it and just kind of peel back the layers a little bit and let you guys in on that conversation as we just kind of reflect on it a little bit. And I know there are some past episodes from when we were engaged that we were just kind of walking you guys through the roller coaster, but it just
Literally just talking about our days.
yeah, literally. But a short, like 2-minute recap. We get
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
I had literally had something pop in my brain, and you said I could do this, so I'm gonna do it anyways. I think we should define engagement season, and what I mean by that is, I like how Pastor, who married us, defined it, and it's the beginning of the merging
yeah.
of the two lives to become one. As we are Christian and we believe that marriage is two lives becoming one.
Yeah.
The engagement season was and is the merging, the beginning of that merging.
Yeah.
It's when we made the commitment. Like,
Sure.
nope, this is what we want to do. And so I
Sure.
think it's important to say that. Like, and we started it probably before engagement.
Yeah.
We were committed, but not everyone. Some people feel like that commitment is really solidified once they are engaged.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to just say, like, it was the engagement season, the way that I feel like we defined it and have defined it, is it's not just about getting a ring, getting down on one knee, but it was a defining time period of the merging, the beginning mergings of our life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's a great point. It was something that, to jump straight into it before I get into that, like, I think it was something I really struggled with. We were in premarital counseling while we were engaged, and we had to make a really big decision about my dog Cooper, now our dog Cooper. And it was one of those things where I was a wreck. Like, Cooper was not okay. He had hurt himself majorly. I was a wreck, and we had to make this really big decision about what we're going to do with him. Do we take him to the emergency room, whatever? And we had to make that decision together. We have premarital counseling the next morning. Like, we work through it together. We have premarital counseling next morning, and, you know, Pastor would always start with, so what's going on? What's been happening? Like,
it's a week between meetings. So what happened this week?
And so that was the big thing that had to happen. That, I think my dog's going to die like 3 times. And so one of the things that I had asked him that I was like really struggling with is, and this was like 3 months before I got married. And I was like, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my brain around what switch is going to flip on our wedding day.
Yeah.
Because at that point we stopped being long distance that summer. And so we had kind of been in this, what we now call merging season, of merging our lives together. And I was just really struggling because I was starting to feel like, so like I can't separate my life from you anymore. Like, there's so much oneness. There's so much of us together. Like, we were making big decisions together, not just about the dogs, but about our careers, about moving, about storage units, about moving trucks, about
finances,
food, about finance, so many budgets, like so much. Like, at that point we had combined our bank account. Like, we just had a lot of things that were happening in engagement, because that was what was right for us. And we can talk about that later in a little bit, but like, that's what was right for us, was we needed to do a lot of that merging just because of our life circumstances with moving and job changes and everything. And so I was like, I just can't get my brain around what switch is going to flip on wedding day, because I already feel I can't separate my life from you.
Yeah.
And he said to us, like, that scripture, and he ended up using it in our wedding, that like, the two shall become one.
Yeah.
And he said to us, he said, Courtney, the marriage ceremony is a holy moment. But it is a marking of what has happened and what will continue to happen. He said the becoming has already started, and the becoming will continue. It will continue for the rest of your lives. The becoming process is not just something that stops on your wedding day, and it's not something that starts on your wedding day. The becoming is a process. And so that has already happened. And so he basically gave me permission to say, like, it's okay if there's a part of you that already feels like Nick is you, like you are Nick is like you. There's a oneness there. It's okay if there's a part of you that's there. There's also a part of you, if after you're married, you still don't feel total oneness there. Like, he's like, because it's a process. It's an absolute process. of that merging and what that becomes. And so it just really, it freed me to not be so legalistic about what engagement seasons could be and what it wasn't. It really released me from the, should we have a combined bank account right now, or should we wait until we have a marriage certificate? Like,
Yeah.
should we, shouldn't we? And everybody, I mean, what the decisions are different for every person. Like, I'm not saying, like, I talk to, like, when engaged people talk to me, like, they're like, what did you do? And I'm like, well, this is what I did. But I think there's
Yeah.
a bunch of different answers. But I feel like there's just this freedom. Like, for us, engagement season was marked by us no longer being long distance for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, I moved to Georgia. Right before I moved to Georgia, you said, hey, I think we're not going to stay in Georgia very long. And I was like, cool. I thought we were going to be here for like 3 years, but that's fine. And then I switched my career. I went into full-time self-employment.
Yeah.
And then, so we're in this community. We're no longer long distance. So we're learning like daily life together,
Yeah.
like grocery shopping together, because we spend free meals together, like free meals. So like figuring out how to navigate loss and grief of moving, but also joy of being together and getting married and all of these different avenues. And then to plan a wedding and to prep and to get ready to move again, and for you to resign from your job, and for you to change your career, which was also a surprise. And so there's just a lot of change. It was a lot of change, and navigating that together, and also recognizing all of the different stories and triggers and trauma that was coming up, that it was just a wild season.
Yeah.
It was a wild season of life. And sometimes I look at it and I'm like, it feels like I was glazed over. So I don't know. There's just some thoughts. I'm really glad that you launched into the becoming thing, because I think it really sets the attitude. And, you know, I don't want to spend a million years here, but like, I think it's important to talk about, because I think it was a really good mindset that really freed us just to be.
Yeah. I mean, we were planning a wedding. Obviously, we had a wedding, but I feel like there are some, especially younger individuals, that they view engagement as, well, that's when you plan your wedding and you plan how your life is supposed to, it's going to look. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Or, you know, and for some that's true, but for us it was that, but it was also, I mean, we had lived a lot of life not with another individual.
Yeah.
It probably would have been much different if we were 21 and going through that season, because let's just be honest, not a lot of 21-year-olds are merging a lot of life.
Yeah.
I mean, you at that point, you are then learning to live a life together as one.
Yeah, you're growing up together.
You're growing up together. And we, being later on, I mean, we had to merge what we already had learned, ingrained, chosen to enjoy, chosen to dislike. I mean, chosen ways of communication. I am very much so, in the best of ways, nowhere near the same person I was 10 years ago.
For sure.
And so it was definitely, ours was definitely emerging.
Yeah. What stands out to you about like that season? Like, when you look back, when you reflect on it, are there any like moments or lessons that really stand out to you?
I mean, there are definitely moments. I mean, learning to communicate is huge. But also learning not just how to like tell you something or to say something, but also learning like, you know, so for example, we weren't long distance anymore. Before you moved down, we're engaged. We're 3 hours away still for a few months. And I had fallen in love with playing pickleball. So 3 to 5 nights a week, I'm going to play pickleball. And I'm having a great time. It's fine. You're not there. And I don't feel like I'm neglecting you. I mean, you were doing things, and I would call you every evening. We'd talk for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, I just wouldn't watch TV in the evening. You know what I mean? I'm going home to eat and all that. Well, when you move there, it was like, oh man, I don't get to play pickleball as much, because not because I was giving it up, but because I was like, oh, I want to come to your house and spend time with you, or I want to go home and you come to my house and spend time with me. And so it was very much so like a changing of, instead of feeling like I was giving something up, it was, no, I get to go do this, which is what I do want to do. I get to go spend time with my fiance, and I haven't gotten to do that. So instead of feeling like I was giving up something, like, oh man, I'm losing this awesome thing. Like, no, I'm just replacing this awesome thing for what I want to do more.
Yeah.
And I still got to go play plenty of pickleball and do those things. We put it on schedule and made time for it, and it's wonderful and amazing. But like, not everything is, oh, I'm losing this.
Yeah.
And like kind of realizing that, like, we're gaining so much by our presence with each other.
Yeah.
And so that shrinking of distance really helped me grow to, I don't know, I always say I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And it helped me in that way. Realizing that, no, I like, instead of going to lunch with coworkers, I was like, what are you doing for lunch, Nick? I'm going to Courtney's. Oh, well, you never go to lunch with us anymore. Sorry, I'm going to Courtney. Like, I want to go spend time with her. Like,
we were playing some catch up.
Yeah,
from not living in the same city for a long time.
So it was that that changing, I don't know, maybe maturing of thought.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm losing this, but no, I was gaining what I wanted in the long run.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. That was something that stood out to me. And there's tons of things. I mean, learning to celebrate wins with you, and also learning to deal with, I hate to say losses. I don't know that we had a ton of losses, but dealing with hard.
It was a lot of hard for me.
Yeah. But I mean, you talked about Cooper getting hurt. And we played a game before the new year, maybe. I don't remember. And we talked, one of the questions, well, we had to come up with answers, and we were trying to guess each other's answers or whatever for the game. And one of the questions was, what was one of your favorite moments from the year? Mm. And I knew what a couple of years would be. I mean, both of ours was like, we got married, but we weren't trying to give the cliche answer. And one of yours was, I remember whenever Cooper had been being watered from a syringe for 3 days.
Yeah, we had to syringe feed him water.
Yeah. And it was very difficult. Just, he was so pitiful, and he was hurting. And I know, like, I don't know that I've ever told you this, but I remember going through the thought process of, like, at what point do we say this dog is suffering and we have to put him down?
Oh yeah, I was there.
And it just hurt. Mm-hmm. And I remember he stood up and he hobbled over to the water bowl.
I'm going to cry right now.
He stood up and hobbled over to the water bowl. And I remember just running over to you and like grabbing you. And we're both like trying to be quiet because we don't want to distract him, but we're watching him across the room. And we're like, he's going to get water. What are you doing? You're moving on your own. And when he started drinking water, we both just yelled. I mean, it was like the Super Bowl.
And it was so much exclamation.
Yeah. And so both of us kind of like having that, that slow motion moment where we were so excited. I mean, that was a victory in such a difficult time. And a lot of people be like, it's just a dog. I don't care what people think about that. This is your child for the last 5 6 years.
Yeah.
Cooper saved you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's the same as when I thought Larry was gone.
Yeah.
And I was so
Larry
sad. Larry's my cat.
Everyone will get all of the names.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Well, they know Cooper and Shadow. You've had them forever.
Yeah.
Larry's the cat that you saw last episode. But I remember being upset. Larry got out and we thought he was gone, and a part of me goes, why am I acting like this? But then the other part of me, I told one of my coworkers yesterday that Larry made my life so much better.
Yeah. Because
I got him when I was alone, and he gave me someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And that's what your dogs have been for you. And they gave you companionship and relationship. And so, yeah, I was right there with you.
Yeah.
And we got to experience that very difficult.
Yeah, it was a hard few days.
Time into an amazing, what felt like just huge victory. And then I remember you just feeling like you were just so much lighter, and you're like, there's hope.
Yeah.
And I remember going, like, yeah, we're there. But, 2 days before then, we're sitting in your bed, like on your bed, because the crates are there. We're sitting on your bed,
Yeah.
watching him.
Yeah.
Not doing anything we're not supposed to. Literally watching Cooper the dog, sitting on the bed. I was sitting on the end of the bed looking at him. You were sitting at the head of the bed looking at him. And I remember you going, what do we do? Do we take him to the vet? Do we take him to the emergency room? Like, what do we do here? And it was like, what, 11? It was late.
It was late. It
And I
had been
remember,
like 2 days of this.
Yeah. And I remember we sat there, and in my brain, I told myself, I was like, why would we not go? And I said, let's go. And you're like, really? I said, yes. I said, what's the benefit of, because you were like, do I wait till the morning time?
Yeah, but I was like having a hard time talking. I was so upset.
And I said, let's go. And you said, really? Are you sure? And I said, yes. I said, you're not going to sleep tonight. You're not going to be well. I said, it's like midnight or whatever it was. I need to be going home, but I'm not going to sleep well knowing that you're not going to sleep well. I was like, no, we're going. And so we had that moment of, again, we making that decision, that hard decision that, no, I didn't want to go to the emergency vet at 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning.
But I probably wouldn't have convinced myself to go.
Exactly.
I needed you to help me.
And so I was like, F it, we're going. Like, we need to go.
It was very much like that.
Yeah. And so I just started packing stuff up. I was like, nope, we're going. And you're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah.
There was a lot of hard decisions in that season.
Yeah, that's just one example.
There's just a lot of big moments that, I don't know. I think it requires a level of trust. Like, I think it required new levels of trust. Obviously, I trusted you enough to be like, yes, I'll marry you. But like, there was in this season with
But it's almost
finances.
like the trust. You say that. Yes, I'll marry you. I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not saying that God made this stuff happen, but
then you need to live it out.
But then it's like, do you trust this individual? Because you need to.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's about to be revealed.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were some revelations of, no, I do trust you.
Yeah.
And there were some revelations of, no, I choose you above everyone else and above all else. And there were revelations of, no, I want this.
Yeah.
And I struggled with a lot of times, like, again, I hadn't been in any extremely long relationship, and I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, like, we got into a fight. She's going to leave me. I'm the bozo who had you move down. Why would you leave me? You moved to another state for me. You're not going to leave me because I don't even know, want to go out on a date that night. I don't know an example. Like, there were plenty of trivial, like, you were upset about something maybe that I said or did. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there like, great, she's going to leave me because I'm a dum-dum. And no, like, and you told me so many times, you're like, that's not even an option. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And I still have those moments where I'm sitting and I'm like, this was a bad fight. And she's probably going to pack up and leave me. And you're like, walk in 5 minutes later and you're like, look, we need to talk about this because I choose you. And I'm like, what do you mean you choose me? You're supposed to be mad and leaving me. And you're like, what? I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't cross my mind.
Yeah. So there are those moments.
But can we just name for a moment that people getting upset with you and leaving is very storied for you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, maybe not even leaving, but just having any sort of hardship moment.
Yeah, it's very storied for you.
As far as, it's, yeah.
So we can have like a whole conversation that also, I feel like as much as we talked prior to us closing the long distance gap, as much as we talked and as much as we like spent time together, there was this new level of being in each other's worlds so much. Like, obviously I was working from home, you were working at the church at the time, but there was this like immersion of being in each other's worlds that came with a lot of fun and a lot of good, and like, wow, this is great. Like, I get to see you tomorrow again.
Yeah.
And again.
There were plenty of moments where you're like, is this real?
And again.
Yeah.
But then there was also moments of we were spending so much time together that there was more triggering happening. There were more I don't really necessarily feel like there was like bigger like fights necessarily, but there was definitely
There were bigger fights,
stories.
but mainly because we hadn't had the opportunity to work through those things. So
yeah,
in essence, yes, bigger and more, but it's simply because we're in proximity.
yeah,
Things are going to happen. I
Yeah.
mean, now we're married and live in the same house, and we have fought more than ever.
correct.
However,
We've been together more than ever
we've
before.
been together more than ever. We're having to make decisions more than ever.
Yeah.
So to say, oh, we fought so much, like we weren't around each other to fight. Every time we
Yeah.
saw each other, it was like a vacation. Like, finally, I
was.
get to see you. Like, why would I fight with you? Whatever
Yeah.
you want to do, baby, let's do it. Like, you want to go downtown? Now you're like, you want to go downtown? I'm like,
And
I mean, I
why do you
do,
never want to do
but
things that I want to do?
I'm just saying, like, it's very much so that reality. Like,
Yeah.
it became like, okay, like I feel like there was a moment once you were down there in Georgia, like down there, and it kind of became a realization of like, no, you're not leaving. And
you finally believed me at some point.
well, but also you're not leaving in the sense of like, we left that time period of, so I guess we just do normal things.
Yeah.
We just kind of need to do it normal. Like, it was like,
We
all
need to
right,
go
so
grocery shopping together.
Yeah, I was like, do we go to Kroger? Like, because it for a long time it was like, all right, what are we doing? What adventure are we going on today, or what are we doing? And I was sitting there like exhausted, like I can't think of another date
because our long distance trips were so intentional
Absolutely.
and planned, and as yes, our lives are intentional, and I do feel like we spend intentional time. We just started doing everyday life together.
Yeah.
And so we had to figure out, I mean, I do remember us being like, and with our circumstances, like I was moving to his community, to his city, like
Yeah.
and at that point when I moved to your city, we had a good feeling we weren't going to be there forever. We didn't know exactly when we were going to move.
Didn't know the timeline, but I feel like it was like 2 weeks before you moved. I was like, hey,
we're not going to stay in Georgia, by the way.
I don't think we're going to be here as long as we thought. And you were
Yep.
like,
okay, cool. I'm just leaving my hometown. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. But all that being said, like we didn't know how long my season in Georgia was going to be before we left. Was it going to be 3 months? Was it going to be 6 months? Was it going to be a year? Like we didn't know. We didn't have that confirmation from God when that first happened. But so like all that being said, like I was just kind of like, well, I'm not going to, join a bunch of social clubs here just to turn around and leave them, because I don't know. And so that was really hard for me. I was dealing with the grief of leaving while also dealing with like all of the mind craziness.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk about what it's like to be mentally preparing for marriage after being single for so long. I feel like we should kind of end with that. But like, I think there was, I think there was a, there was this, hey, I'm just kind of attaching my life to yours that's already existing. That was really hard, because I felt like it was, when we were long distance, I would make trips to Georgia. Mm-hmm. And so it just felt like it was a long distance trip to Georgia that was never ending, that I was never going home.
I remember having a conversation with a very close friend. You used to stay at their home when you would visit Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, she's described it kind of like she feels like she's like in vacation mode. And I remember him going, yeah, the unfortunate reality is for the next 4 months, which that's how long it was until we were married. Like for the next 4 months, that's kind of what it is. It's vacation mode, unfortunately, because and at that point, like we hadn't said, oh, we're moving, but it was, you couldn't get settled because you knew you weren't going to live where you were going to be. Whether it was we stayed in the same town, we still had to move to an apartment. Yeah,
we were both in temporary housing. Yeah. So even if we were to stay in Georgia, we were both going to have to move somewhere together.
Yeah. And so I remember him saying, like, that is one of the most unfortunate parts of engagement is the timeline starts getting smaller and smaller of when that vacation, quote unquote vacation. It's not vacation. It's terrible. Vacation's supposed to be fun. But the last few months of engagement not terrible, but it's difficult because you're like, can we just go elope already and get this over? Like,
Yeah.
let the merge be done.
Yeah.
And so, but I remember that conversation. I remember you saying, you were like, I just feel like I'm in vacation mode. Like I'm living out of my suitcase. That's how I feel. Because you hadn't like unpacked a bunch of stuff because you knew you were moving.
Yeah.
Why would you?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a tough season.
Moving to a different apartment, not towns. I need to make sure that's clear.
Yeah,
we did not know we were moving
towns again
until what, 6-7 weeks before we did it?
Not even.
Yeah.
I think shorter than that.
So
maybe a month.
I just don't want anyone that possibly, if they watch it from the church or anything like that,
it was not
planned.
It was not premeditated.
Not at all.
It was
very much so
choice.
like, hey, I feel like the Lord has opened this door.
And we were like, let's see what happens. And then like we started looking and like then found like a place to rent that we're like, cool, great, awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Like amazing.
And
so
also
quickly.
it was like, what are we doing for money? And then God was like,
boom.
There you go.
Like,
so
opportunity.
Wasn't premeditated, wasn't pre-planned. I just have to say that for any possible listener from that community.
We don't want anybody to think that we were just sneaking
not.
around, because we were not. It was a very short and surprising thing. And
when we knew, I told the people that needed to know, and they gave me the timeline they wished, and I honored that.
All the requests.
Absolutely. So anyways.
Important to say.
Yeah, it just felt needed.
Well, let's wrap up talking about.
I want to ask you though, is there any particular moment or part, season? I mean, you don't have to elaborate as much. I'm sorry, we derailed a little bit.
It's okay.
But is there anything that stands out to you about good, bad, ugly, wonderful?
I mean, I think good was, like I alluded to before, the fact that I never had to like go back home from visiting you. You know, the hard part was I felt like I was visiting you, and this was my home, my new home though. But I just felt like I was perpetually visiting you. And if anybody asks me, like, you know, how do you navigate long distance, and how do you navigate merging and going from long distance to no longer being long distance, it's hard for me to like give advice or share what that was like for us in our season in Georgia, because it was so short and it was so temporary. Like when I think about, how can I actually help when it talks about when people ask like going from long distance to no long distance, I'm like, let's talk about like actually when we got married and we were living together, like that. I'm like, okay, that I feel like talk about. When we were in Georgia, I feel like it was kind of hazy. There was just a lot going on. There was a lot of grief in my own life and in my own story. There was a lot of grief from leaving. But there was just like a lot of joy too about just doing life with you and living good days and hard days and spending weekends together. And I keep mentioning going grocery shopping, but that was like such a thing of being like, we don't need to individually grocery shop. We spend almost every meal together, like unless it's breakfast in the morning. But like I didn't even have a full kitchen in my place.
We cooked one meal in your house.
Yeah. I didn't have a full kitchen.
Well,
I had like a kitchenette in the basement that I stayed in.
One of those skillet meals where it's literally dump in, pan, turn on.
Yeah.
That's all. And I remember you did one of those. Everything else we cooked
at your house. So like we were grocery shopping together. We had a lot of budget conversations. That stands out to me, which is great because we've had to keep having budget conversations. And, you know, hopefully maybe it'll slow down one day. Maybe we'll get some regularity in our budget. But
I think the only way that slows down is if we are uber rich and somebody else is taking care of the conversation.
For sure. So I will say that, you know, a lot of people talk about marriage and relationships and money. And, you know, I've talked to some people who have been engaged and have been like, oh, we've kept money very, very separate. Like we've talked about it, but like we're not really diving into it until we're married. And if that's your choice, like absolutely, like go for it. I fully respect it. For us, we just didn't have that luxury because we were doing so many changes. At one point, I thought I was gonna have to get a new car. Yeah. Like we were
making a decision. I remember going like, "Hey, we need to sell your car while we can get top dollar. You can have my car."
I'm like, "This is my decision and my car." And then it was like, "Oh, this is our decision because it's gonna be our car."
I was like, "You can have mine, and I'll go buy a junker or something.
There
You
were
know, I was
so
like, I don't
many
need anything. Yeah.
conversations like that.
Yeah.
There was that's when I talk about the merging. I mean, that car situation is a great idea. I was having car problems, a great example, having car problems and being like, what am I going to do? And you're like, here's the plan. I'm like, no, this is my decision.
car.
This is not your decision.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it was starting to get to the place. And I remember telling somebody, it was starting to get to the place where my life decisions were outlasting this current season of relationship. A decision about a car, a decision about my career, a decision about these other big life things.
Mm-hmm.
Even though as a legal single, not legally married to you yet, I had full right to make all the decisions by myself. The decisions I was making was going to affect you as my legal spouse in partnership. And so I think the reality of like, just because of the nature of our life, because of me going into self-employment, of you then going into self-employment, like we just had to have a lot of those merging and money conversations. And what would it look like for us to move money here, and some of the money I was making to cover this, and some of the money you was making to cover this, and merge this, and to do these for the combined bank account, and this thing and this thing. And so I feel like we had a lot of money conversations that I don't often hear engaged couples having that much. People don't talk about money, period, but like people don't talk about talking about money. That's what I'm saying. People don't talk about talking about money.
I've never heard my parents talk about their finances once.
Yeah.
Not once. And it's aggravating.
We talked about it so much.
Yeah.
If you are listening, the shameless plug, if you're listening and want any insight on the tools that we've used to navigate all of this, just DM me and I'll send you all of my links.
We can give you
we can give you discounts. This is not an ad, not sponsored. I'm not an influencer, but however, I have influenced people. So I guess I am an influencer in that way. But okay, let's wrap up with this.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up with, what was it like for you mentally preparing for your wedding day, for marriage, after living single for so long?
Well, first, let me ask a question. It's simply because I have thoughts, but I don't know how far to take it. Are we going all the way to wedding day right here?
Sure.
Okay.
Just prior to, I mean,
yeah.
You don't have to talk about like actual wedding day yet if you don't want to.
I mean, it's fine. Well, I know we talked about having a wedding day conversation.
Yeah, we might. But what was it like mentally and emotionally preparing, and being in this season of engagement? You have a fiance, you're preparing to be a husband, when there was a season in your life where you didn't know that was going to happen.
I mean, I alluded to some of it earlier where, I mean, there were times I was quite like, she's going to leave. Mm-hmm. She's going to go. So to say it was all sunshine and rainbows would be a bull-faced lie. Because, I mean, I struggled at times. Not all the time. There were far more great times than there were hard times, in my opinion. Maybe it's because, if I'm being honest, it's cheesy to say, but even at the hardest times, I still love that I get to choose to do that with you. And I know it's a big moment, but I like it. Maybe I mean, we did have hard moments and hard conversations. I mean, we had moments where you weren't yelling, but you would look at me and you'd say, I just feel like you're not seeing me, or something like that. And it's because that's part of your story, and that's part of what you have worked through. And even so much so as to being able to say those words to me.
Yeah.
Hey, I have to express this. I would normally swallow that, and you didn't. And so, but even in those moments, in those hard, arduous times, we did it together. And so, yes, I know there were more of those than we were used to, but it still doesn't. I look back and I don't feel like it was just so. I felt like it was difficult joy. I don't know how to explain that. It's kind of an oxymoron. but it was difficult joy. And I mean that so great. I mean, there's no reservation, there's no hesitation. I knew before I ever got down on one knee, but I knew, like, no, I want this individual to be my wife. And I don't care what I have to, I hate to say change because it's like I'm giving up and I'm doing something that I shouldn't have to do for me. But I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to be better for her. And it was difficult, but it was so much joy. Mm. And I can't explain it any other way. I mean, it was just difficult joy. And not always difficult, not always joy, but always worth it.
Yeah.
For sure. And I can say that with literally all of me. Because even now, it's not always just woohoo. I get to have this really hard conversation with you. Like, it's not fun all the time.
Yeah.
But my gosh, do I look forward to getting off work and coming home to my wife. Mm. And that's how I felt, and that's how I feel. And I had never felt that about anyone in my entire life. Mm. I've never once. I've tell you all the time. Normally by this point, I'd be tired of you.
You do tell me that a lot.
And I'm not. So, I mean, it just, that is something mentally that I really had to not work through, if I'm being honest. Like, I was there, but I had to grow accustomed to how that felt. Mm. Because I had never felt that. Mm. And my own flesh resisted at times. I mean, self-sabotage is real. Mm-hmm. Especially when you're terrified to commit. I mean, before you, my longest relationship was 3 months. Mm-hmm. And it didn't end great. Mm-hmm. It turned into a situationship that was much longer than 3 months. And it was very difficult for me. Yeah. And the way that it ended was difficult for me. And so, yeah, like you said, I mean, my story is very much so like, nobody's committed to me.
Yeah.
And so there were plenty of moments and plenty of thoughts of when's the other foot going to land, or however that saying goes.
Shoe going to drop.
Yeah, when's the other shoe going to drop? But not because anything you did. Literally all me. Literally all internal past just bubbling up at times, and me sitting there going like, what? And then turning to you for one, saying, no, I'm here. I mean, I'm committed, but also turning to those that I had conversations with, just spiritual partners that I was like 6-9 months earlier weeping on their couch. Like, nobody loves me.
Yeah.
In a spousal way. Mm-hmm. People love me, but I don't. When's my turn? When do I get it? When is this going to happen? And I've had those conversations before you were ever even a thought. But I remember just before we got together having real hard conversations with people about how I felt like I was in the best place mentally I'd ever been. I was in the best place physically I'd ever been. Spiritually, I was killing the game. When the heck is it my turn? Mm. And then it was my turn. And then my body's like, whoa, let me clench up, let me tighten up. You know, it felt like right before the impact. And and luckily there was no impact. I mean, it was real. It was happening, and it did happen, and it is happening. And there are still moments. We are married. The only way, you said it, you held up the piece of paper and you're like, well, you need a lawyer to get rid of me now.
I did.
The only
the
way.
day I held the marriage certificate in my hand, I was like, if you want to get rid of me, you need a lawyer now.
Yeah. So the only way that that's happening is in a difficult way at this point. So obviously you're committed. Obviously I'm committed. But there are still moments where my flesh has, I don't know, do we call it flesh memories? I don't know, cellular memories. I mean, there are instinctual things that my body has grown accustomed to with the upbringing that I had.
It's very storied for you.
That there are times where I still wait for that impact.
Yeah, of course.
So that, I mean, that was, it was difficult joy.
I love difficult joy. I think that's the title of this podcast. I think I titled it. Everyone else already knows that because they saw the title, but just to let you know, I just named it Difficult Joy.
That's fine.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That was really honest and that was really vulnerable. And
I'm glad it's recorded because it's what I call a Holy Spirit moment. I couldn't recite it again if I tried.
Well, let's hope that this stays.
Hashtag ADHD.
Yeah, I think what was unique for me about this season, I mean, you alluded to it a little bit, but for me, like being single, talking to singles, being in single ministry, talking about that, I definitely resonate with you about I'm doing the right things, I'm checking the right boxes, when's my turn.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely resonate with that, and I definitely feel that. And
because we were taught that God's a transactional God.
For sure. But like I alluded to in previous episodes, like I did get to the point where I was like, this probably isn't going to happen for me. Like, and am I okay if it doesn't happen? Like, I want it to happen, but am I okay it's not happening? And so as I was going through all these moments, the bridal shower, the trying on my dress, the, picking out my wedding band I'm going to wear for the rest of my life. Like, as I was going through all these moments, I shared about this on Instagram, but like the first time I went dress shopping was such a difficult day for me to get my brain around. You
came back and you weren't happy.
I was glazed over. We went to the bridal shop and it was my mom and almost all of my bridesmaids, all of my bridesmaids that were in town. And we were trying on dresses and I just was not present. Like I was not present at all. It was such an out of body experience. Like I could get emotional just thinking about it. Like it was such an out of body experience because it wasn't this like moment that was like full of joy. Like my body was under so much protection of my joy. It wasn't this moment of, oh my gosh, it's finally my turn. It was this moment of like, I actually had to tell my body, like, you're okay and you get to delight in this and you get to play, because I had protected my heart and my body from ever believing that could happen for me, that I could be the girl in the wedding dress. And I know that there's people listening to this who resonate with that, who are like, am I going to be the girl trying on wedding dresses? I've been to appointment after appointment after appointment with sisters and cousins and friends. And when is it going to be my turn to be the girl up there trying on the wedding dresses? And as I was sitting there at my first wedding dress appointment, I was so guarded. I was so guarded because there was just so much pain that had come in watching another wedding happen, watching another wedding happen. And I ended up going back a couple days later with just my mom and my sister on FaceTime. And I was able to find that safety and like that present day. And so the preparation for the wedding festivities, I had to go real slow, and I had to give myself grace for that. I had to give myself grace for really like wearing the term, what does it mean to be a bride, and what does it mean to do these things? I think one thing, just with us being older and having been to a million weddings and perspective and everything, I do think we had a healthy balance of prepping for marriage more than we were prepping for a wedding. So I do think we didn't really talk about that at all, but like I see a lot of couples who prep for a wedding more than they prep for the marriage.
Yeah, for sure.
So I do think like I don't, when I look back at the wedding, took up a lot of time from a planning perspective, but it doesn't feel like it was like a focal point. Like when I look back on the season, I'm like, I really do feel like marriage and getting ready for marriage was way more of a focal point than the wedding. Not every day, but like from a task perspective, the wedding. But I think like heart wise, I felt I was much more in a prepping for marriage perspective. But I think allowing.
I just want to say, which is funny to me because you killed the wedding planning.
Thank you.
You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
So anyways.
Thank you.
But that allowed.
Yeah. I think just allowing and reminding my body, like, it's okay to feel delight. It's okay to feel joy. It's okay for this to be your moment. And honestly, it was hard. And so I just got to the point where I just let it be what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And that transpired into our wedding day too.
Yeah.
Our wedding day was great. I won't talk too much about that now, but our wedding day was great. But so my attitude even going into wedding day was, I'm just going to let it be. I'm not going to put expectations on it. I'm just going to let it be. Like, this is my story. And my story is, I'm the girl who 6 months before I met you thought this was never going to happen. I'm the girl who's been bridesmaid after bridesmaid after bridesmaid, being like, protect your heart, guard it up, because this hurts. Like, this hurts. And how am I going to have so much joy for this person who I love so much, who's going to get married, and I'm going to sit on the sidelines again and like box up that pain. And so I think just like giving yourself the ability to like feel what needs to be felt. And while there was so much joy in that season, my difficult joy is there was so much joy about what is to come, but there was also so much grief at the same time.
Yeah.
I was experiencing past grief. I was experiencing current grief by leaving my community and leaving my family and leaving what I knew to enter into this new season, to choose you. Like, being able to sit in both the difficulty and the joy, both the grief and the gratitude, giving myself permission to be as I was in this fiance season, I think was so important, just to not be so hard on myself. And in the middle of all of this, if we talk about stories, so much of my story and what's super storied for me is minimize how you feel so that other people have space for what they need to feel. And so my invitation in entering into merging with you was trusting that I could be honest and not just transparent, but vulnerable with you. Vulnerable says, hey, here's the knife. I'm going to give it to you. And I'm actually not in control of so whether or not you're going to stab me with it or not. That's vulnerability. Transparency is there's a knife. Vulnerability is I'm giving you the knife. And whether or not you're going to stab me with it, it is showing you, like, it was the invitation to show you a part of me that I don't know if I've let anybody see before.
Yeah.
And letting you into why I was feeling what I was feeling, and actually trusting that I would be met with a space, a safe space to just be. And so my theme of that year was learning to do things with God. And turns out I was also needing to learn how to do things with you. And so growing in the vulnerability with you, the vulnerability of myself, of feeling so much incredible joy and so much incredible confusion and grief at the same time, marked this really, really impactful season. And I'll forever be grateful for it, because I do feel like it, I don't know, we haven't been married that long, so I can't necessarily say like it was so important, but it feels a couple months in that I can't imagine life without that season.
Yeah.
I can't imagine life without that season of honesty and of transparency and vulnerability with you. And actually learning to trust somebody with my heart and to let somebody carry the things that I've never let anybody see in my life before.
Yeah. And that goes, I mean, that's the emotional, that's the true essence of what engagement should be. If we're being honest with what you just said, learning to give the other person the knife, as terrifying as that is.
So scary.
But also, in the other regard, you've told me that, because I told you I don't know when we're moving, but I don't think it's going to be that long. And I remember after we moved, or we're getting ready to move, and you said, you told me, Nick, I need you to know I have zero regrets about moving here. I'm glad I did. I'm glad that I spent this 3-month season here. And because you didn't want me to feel the guilt.
Yeah.
Of like, gosh, I made you do this 3 months ago, and I'm asking you to do it again, but I promise I don't feel like it's me. I feel like it's the Lord leading us to our next. and you just showing so much grace towards me and saying, hey, I don't regret it at all. And that shows the growth and the necessity of that season.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously, I don't regret you moving down. I don't regret us getting that time together because it was so pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
But first and foremost, thank you for that expression of giving me that, but also thank you for sharing what I could formulate a very good, concise argument as to that's what engagement season means.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it should mean.
Yeah.
And I know it's got all this other logistical stuff and all the things that we've already talked about, but your heart there it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad. Well, I think that wraps up this conversation. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to go through a little difficult joy.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
Oh, goodness. Well, thanks all for listening, and we'll be back. And if you got any questions or anything that comes up, would love to hear from you. Would love to hear what really stands out to you, whether you send an email or DM or drop a comment. Would just love to hear what really connects with you, resonates with you, any thoughts that you have. I really do love the conversations that come up after we post these, as I think it's really impactful. So would love to hear if you have different thoughts too.
Absolutely.
I'm totally open to
I know
that.
a lot of people that are in that season.
Yeah.
So if you have questions, we don't necessarily have the best answers.
We're not pros, but we can share what's happening.
But we can talk about our experience.
For sure. For sure. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back next time with another episode of Grace for the Growth. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Grace for the Growth podcast with Courtney and Leo. I hope that this conversation encouraged you and inspired you on your own growth journey and as you pursue a life full of authenticity and freedom. I want to encourage you to interact with us on social media at Grace for the Growth and at Courtney Y. Leo. Also, if you've got any ideas, way that these episodes have impacted you or encouraged you, I want to invite you to either DM us or email us at hello@graceforthegrowth.com. Until next time, I challenge you to embrace your story, welcome the messy, sit in the unknown, and live authentically. Bye-bye now.